Alright, hello and welcome. My name is Phil. I'm from the Tim and Phil Talk About Games podcast. And today I'm bringing you a little review of a game called Another Perspective. Now, a little background before I start going through the gameplay and that kind of stuff while I'm talking. It is made by a guy, I should say, called Shaun Spalding. Now, if you've ever used the GameMaker software and you've kind of started from scratch and gone through some tutorials, you might know his name because he has done quite a few tutorials with regards to like basic drag and drop and GML, which is the GameMaker coding language. He's done a lot of tutorials that really do help to get the beginner up and running, and that's how I came across this game. So I saw that in one of his videos he'd included a link to a game that he'd made, and actually this is a game that was made quite a few years ago, and he's only recently gone back and refined it to the product that you will see today. So let's just start a new game, because I have played quite a bit of this game. I haven't quite finished it, but I have put about an hour and a half, 2 hours into it. As you can tell from just the startup screen here, it is pretty much a puzzle platformer. It's got kind of a cutesy style to it, very, I guess you'd have to say, Braid-esque character that you play. And essentially you start off just kind of going through doors. That actually is pretty much the objective of the whole game, is to go through doors. Jumping around, you don't quite get to the puzzle part until you've kind of done the little tutorial stuff, but it does give you an opportunity, as you can see from the text that's going through, to kind of get a feel for what the game is already trying to set you up for. Because you kind of have, throughout the whole game, you've got this text that is, basically giving you an insight into the thoughts of the character that you're playing. So he doesn't really remember what he's looking for. He's kind of a little bit, I guess, classic amnesiac. So as you can see, the animations and the lighting there, as you're jumping around, there's good little reactive lighting as you're walking through. Relatively basic relatively basic tile set with regards to graphics, but it's not too bad. Like, plenty of games have relatively simple tile sets, and for a puzzle platformer, you don't really need the tile sets to be particularly involved, because the main point of a platformer is that the difficulty should be in the puzzles and not necessarily in the graphics. Just have a look at Mario and other stuff like that. Now, obviously, the point of a puzzle platformer is that you start off really, really simple, and things get, as they say, a little bit more dangerous as you go along. Very simple controls: up, down, left, right, or left, right, up, down, I should say. And very quickly you run into the central premise and central puzzle mechanic of the game, which is that you can use the shift key in order to kind of shift your player control to another sort of shadow person. And you can see this in the reaction that he has, that he's not sure what's going on, your little character guy. It's pretty effective dialogue, it should be said. So you can be in two places at once. Not only that, but he can actually use the other player as a platform himself. Now you'll notice there what I did, and this is another it's kind of a subtle thing that does come into play later on in terms of the character dialogue, is that you can actually complete a level with the shadow you, or the other you I should say, or the person from another's perspective, as the title might suggest. You can actually use the other person to go through the door. Now that's a relatively subtle thing, but it is a philosophical thing, in that the character does eventually question himself as to say, well, which one of me am I even, and what's going on here? If you played any recent games, the thing that it most reminded me of was the Swapper, which we did review on the podcast a few episodes ago. This game was actually made far, far, far before the Swapper. I think back in 2008 from memory, although Shaun possibly can correct me on that one. And the Swapper was obviously only recently released. The Swapper also has this mechanic of swapping bodies as you go along, but theirs is a little bit more, I guess, visceral. But they are both kind of trying to approach the same kind of ground, cover the same territory with regards to the theme of the game, which is, if I swap my body but I retain my mind, am I really me, etc., etc. What it really means, though, is that you are, in a relatively guess, precarious position where you have to use your players to get around. And if you get stuck, obviously, with a puzzle platform, you want to make it easy for people to restart the room. It's a simple R. So where I went wrong there was that I went down first, so that was a mistake. But you can just basically do that. Like I said, I have played this game a lot more, and I don't want to play too much through to, kind of ruin things for you. One of the other mechanics there is that you can get blocks that are opened by the key as well, and that makes it a little bit more difficult. There are other things that come along throughout the game that make the puzzles even more interesting, stuff like inverted gravity and different characters that have different sets of gravity laws and that kind of stuff. So there is a little bit of complication that comes around in the later levels. As I said, the theme of the game does continue throughout. You get these little insights into the character, into what he's thinking, and that kind of stuff, which is really interesting to me anyway. But for the most part, it's just really solid puzzle gameplay. As I said, I have played the game quite a bit. I've put a couple of hours into it, but I've kind of yet to find a puzzle that's really stumped me for more than, I guess, a minute or two. I found the same though with games like the Swapper. I didn't really have very much problem going through it, and that to me is actually the sign of a successful puzzle platformer, because you want the difficulty grade to be pretty linear. You don't want someone to get to a point where they just get so frustrated and stuck that they just don't want to keep going anymore. So, and that's definitely the main challenge of a puzzle platformer and a puzzle platformer designer, to try and keep the player interested without challenging them too much and making them quit or rage quit and throw the keyboard across the room. I guess the other thing that I wanted to say about this game, having come from the fact that it's by a guy who's done a bunch of tutorials for GameMaker, is that it's really interesting because I've just started using the software myself. It's actually really interesting as a lesson plan itself. So you can actually play this game and go, wait, that's really cool. Like, I didn't know that you could do this in GameMaker. And so far it's been, I don't actually know of any other examples of really good puzzle platformer games that have been released using the GameMaker software. So for me, it's like, well, if it's possible to do these kind of mechanics through GameMaker, that's really cool, and I really want to learn how he's done it. So, kind of the whole time that I've been playing, I've been kind of going, well, hey, that's really cool, and started to kind of think through, oh, what would he have to code? What would he have to use in order to make this mechanic work and to make this, make this game work, essentially. Make the game mechanics work in actual code. So it's kind of cool that way as well. As you can see, there's there's quite good characterization with there you go. So with the internal thoughts, they do seem very kind of genuine. It sounds like he did maybe talk them out loud or speak to someone else and see what kind of natural reactions and natural, I guess, thought patterns or natural thoughts about his situation would come through. And we've said this in the podcast, I'll say it again now, getting natural sounding thoughts and natural sounding dialogue is an incredible talent, and I'm glad that Shaun's been able to do it here. Also, Shaun is British, and you can kind of get that British humour coming through in quite a few of the rooms, kind of that sarcastic, dry humour that's indicative of the British mode of comedy, I guess. So yeah, I guess if you've watched any of his videos at all, go and download it, because it's not only a really great learning experience that you can see exactly what you can make with GameMaker, but it's also supporting a guy who has spent probably, I guess, hundreds of hours putting together tutorials for free on the internet. And if you've even watched through his basic platformer tutorial, which is one of the best tutorials I've ever seen for GameMaker, because it basically teaches you how to make a very fundamental platformer in about 45 minutes, and does so in a really, really structured manner. Probably be right at home at a university level kind of computer science degree, I guess. Not that I've had one, but it's kind of that level of really clear instruction. So if you've used any of his videos, or if you just really like puzzle platformers, 100% recommend this game. So yeah, thanks Shaun, and thank you for watching this video. You can obviously join us on our more regular podcast, which is Tim and Phill Talk About Games. You can see the website just up there. It's timandphill.com. Otherwise, if you prefer Facebook, we are also at facebook.com/timandphill. And if you want to hit us up on Twitter, you'll probably see a recurring theme here. Our username is @timandphill. All of those with 2 L's. Anyway, thanks for listening and happy gaming.